This is Brent Allan Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. And this, friends, neighbors, and kin, is a Common Lawyer comments concerning our common law, our law of the land, as it is compared and contrasted with its ever-present antagonist on every continent and in every age, the law of the city, the law of the land versus the law of the city. And the law of the land, our law of the land, comes in 2 volumes. Our Declaration of 76 calls those volumes the Laws of Nature and the Laws of Nature's God. William Blackstone tells us 11 years before our declaration that those 2 volumes are a slice of that first volume is unwritten, and that is our common law. Our common law are observations of the way things are in relationships between men and men, men and things and things, and those relationships and how they work and the way things are, and they aren't going to change. That's the first volume, Lex Non Scripta. The second volume, Lex Scripta, our Bible. Our Bible is the court of last resort in cases of apparent inconsistency between those 2 volumes. There isn't any inconsistency between those 2 volumes because they're both from the Godhead. And the Godhead is a Godhead of perfect consistency of mind, will, and emotion between 3 persons, the 3 persons of the Godhead, the Creator manifested in 3 persons. Well, to draw those 2 together, the Bible does that, specifically in 2 Peter chapter 3, addresses those both. And another passage, many passages, but another passage in the Bible that addresses those both is Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Both of these passages talk about God's creation, the matter, the things seen and unseen that he has made. Listen to what Peter the Apostle, in his swan song, this particular book of the Bible, for 2 Peter chapter 3, comes in under the rules of evidence as a dying declaration. You know, if a man believes he's going to die, he really believes he's going to die. Whether he does or not, it's not the point. But he believes that death is imminent. Anything he says is admissible in court as an exception to the hearsay rule. Anything is admissible to help better inform the jury. Because we have learned about men and their relationship to the truth. The relationship between men and this thing we call the truth is very strong, and men will tell the truth if they think they're going to die, if they think and believe death is imminent. Peter knew when he wrote the second epistle that he didn't have many days to live. They were going to kill him. And tradition tells us that they did. The powers that be crucified him. And he said, I'm not worthy to be crucified. This is outside the Bible. Extra biblical history. History outside the Bible, reliable probably, but he said, I refuse to be crucified the way my Savior was, but please do it so I'm upside down and not so right side up. And tradition has it they crucified him upside down because he wouldn't change his verdict as a member of that 12-man jury that Jesus Christ impaneled. Listen to what he says. This second epistle, reading from King Jimmy's version. Behold, I now write unto you, in both which I stir up your pure minds by way of remembrance. Pure minds, yeah, that's the new mind that you get at the new birth. Not your old one, your new one. That ye may be mindful of the words which were spoken before by the holy prophets, and of the commandment of us, the apostles of the Lord and Savior. Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, Where is the promise of his coming? For since, watch this, for since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. All things continue. This is what the scoffers say. All things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. What's his point? His point is the scoffers are saying that, but all things will not continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Well, what has continued? Has anything continued from the beginning of creation? Has God promised that anything would continue from the beginning of creation? Answer, yes, he has. The sun comes up, the sun goes down, the world turns around and round. The stars move in fixed patterns every night. The same. Jesus Christ said, we know what's going to happen in the future because we've learned to read the signs of weather. Red sky at night, sailors' delight. Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. The landlubbers say, red sky at night, travelers' delight. Red sky in the morning, travelers take warning. But whether you're on land or sea, we have learned that that is true. I saw the red sky in the morning, just a short time ago. Didn't mean that there was going to be a catastrophe, but it did mean that there was going to be some weather that might make traveling difficult. And sure enough, it happened, started snowing. The roads are difficult. Red sky at night, travelers' delight. Red sky in the morning, travelers take warning, be careful. But we learn that all things continue, or things have continued from the beginning of creation. What goes up must come down. Is that true still? It was true when God created the world, and it's still true. I look at what happens to telephone poles that are set, or electric poles that are set on the side of a hill. Give them 10 years and they're leaning downhill. And give them another 10, they're leaning more. And if the electric company doesn't come, push them back up. Why is that? Well, the geologist calls it creep. Dirt in hills and gravel just creeps so slowly down, gravity pulls it down, it's not detectable unless you look over years. Peter says that the scoffers say all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Now, he said that's not necessarily true. But is it true? Yes, it is true to a degree. We see that. Matter of fact, God promised that the times and the seasons would continue until he destroyed the earth again. He said to Noah, he destroyed the earth with water, and he said to Noah, things will continue. And we learn from the Bible, they will continue as they had continued. They will continue as they continued before until God destroys the earth again. This time, when he destroys the earth, Peter says, let's see what he says here. He said the first time the world, this is still in 2 Peter, the first time the world was overflowed with water, perished. That's the flood of Noah. But the heavens and the earth, verse 7, which are now, by the same word, are kept in store, reserved. What does that mean? That means things continue as they were yesterday and the day before, uniformly. They just continue. Until what? Until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. Be not ignorant, he said. The Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints. The Lord's not slack. He's going to bring a catastrophe, and all things that did continue as they were will not always continue as they were. He says the judgment of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. One commentator said, I read years ago, he said, given the Greek tongue and the words available to Peter the Apostle to write this, he could not have better described nuclear fission. I do not disagree. I've looked at this text closely. He talks about the fundamental elements. The elements, it's translated elements, that is a Greek word that means the most fundamental building blocks of matter. What's the most fundamental building block of matter in our understanding? It's called the atom. And when you split the atom, what do you get? Nuclear fission. Well, he says these fundamental elements shall, King Jimmy's boys said, melt. Well, that's kind of what it means, but it means to break apart. The fundamental elements, whatever he's talking about here, atoms. Does he know what atoms are? Or is he writing not understanding everything he's saying, but knowing that the Spirit of God is superintending what he's writing without disturbing Peter's personality and his vocabulary? Superintending Peter from error. That's the doctrine of inerrancy. But this is his testimony. This is an exception to the hearsay rule. This is the record of his dying declaration. Let's look at this a little closer in light of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. You know the verses. King Jimmy's boys again. In the beginning, that doesn't mean that he's talking about baseball, the big inning. It's the beginning. In the start, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. This is about the gap theory. I read that passage in Peter because I wanted to talk about what people call the gap theory of Genesis chapter 1, between Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. It's improper to call it the gap theory. There's no theory here. The Bible is exceedingly clear about what it's saying. It doesn't leave room for wiggle here. The Hebrew tongue is exact here. It does not say God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. No, it's more precise than that. There is no verb of being in the Semitic tongue, such as Hebrew. The earth doesn't say the earth was, that's a verb of being. Is, was, are. It was in the past tense without form and void when God created it. In fact, Jeremiah, the prophet in the Bible, tells us clearly that God did not create the earth formless. The Hebrew word tohu, same word he uses here, tohu. Tohu means without form, chaotic. Jeremiah says God did not create the world that way. So in verse 1, God created the heavens and the earth. It was not formless. It was not chaotic. But it became that way because it says so, and the earth became without form and void. Now let's think about what Peter said. Peter said all things, the scoffer says all things continue as they were from the beginning. All things continue as they were from the beginning. Do they? Well, they do continue for a certain period of time. Liddell and Hutton, I believe that was their name, a couple of Scottish geologists, they're credited with inventing the discipline that science calls geology. They came up with this idea. They looked around and said, look, we can figure out what happened in the past by looking at what is happening now. Because what's happening now is what has been going on, so we can know what was going on back here because things continue to happen the way they happened before. What goes up does come down. The geological processes are the same. Therefore, they called their idea uniformitarianism. I've heard preachers say, falsely, by the way, some well-known, well-educated, men that have studied the Bible all their lives, say that uniformitarianism is false. Liddell and Hutton supported evolution. What does evolution say? Evolution says that all things have not continued as they were from the beginning of creation. Things change. Isn't that what evolution says? I mean, the confusion about this that people talk about when they try to explain the Bible at these points is over the top of men that I would have expected would be otherwise. You say, well, Brent, have you got the final answer? No, I don't. The Bible does, and it's clear as crystal. Things do continue, and then God chooses to, at different times, insert a catastrophe, a Katrina hurricane, the flood of Noah, and many others, tsunamis of different kinds, catastrophes that turn things upside down. Mount St. Helens, kaboom! That was pretty small compared to the flood of Noah and the way the Bible describes that, but these are catastrophic events, and catastrophic events are part of that continuation. To say it's either one or the other, it's either uniformitarianism, like Liddell and Hutton said, or, and all the geologists still say, or it's catastrophism. Which is it? It's got to be one or the other. No, it doesn't. It's both. And God uses both. Let's not be boneheaded about this. And the Bible is clear that there is a difference between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. It's consecution. The Hebrew text says the earth became. No, it is not even possible. Although I know Hebrew scholars say it is, they're wrong. It is not even possible that it says was. There again, there is no verb of being in the Semitic tongues. Only action. Only action. If a thing doesn't move, it doesn't exist. And that's God's point of view. If a thing doesn't do something, it doesn't exist. Only action words. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth the earth became. And the Winterized version translates it that way. Every time he comes to this verb of undefined action, which, by the way, is also the holy name of God, Yehovah, in the third person singular. Action's big in the Old Testament. God's a doer, and God's people are doers. Daniel said, they who do know their God shall be strong and do. King James translates and do exploits, but the word exploits is not there. Nothing wrong with adding it to make smooth English, but what it says is they shall be strong and do, because that's what God stresses. He's going to make a doer out of his people, doers out of his people. So there is no gap theory. There's just, there's a change between verse 1 and verse 2. Something happened. We don't know exactly what. I have an idea. Well, I think it is. That would be theory. He doesn't say. And if he thought it was important that he speak clearly on that point, he would have. But he didn't. This is God's testimony of creation. What happened? He was there. I wasn't. This is Brent Allan Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. Go to the website, commonlawyer.com. Take advantage of the resources we have there, everything from the winterized translation of the Bible from the original tongues, 35,000 footnotes, and 100, I think we're up to about 190 appendices, or quite a few, tracing major themes through the warp and the woof of the text of the context of the Bible, explaining why I translate the way I do in many cases. You can get that Bible in hard copy. It's 5 volumes because of the 35,000 footnotes or so. Or you can get it digital, or both. And the comparative law text, Excellence of the Common Law, comparing and contrasting our law of the land with the canon civil laws of the city. The only two options that men and nations have for religion, law, and religion. Our common law tradition, the law of the land, and the civil law tradition, the law of the city, and all men and all nations are tending either toward the one or toward the other. Those two poles, those two opposite. Brent Allan Winters, commonlawyer.com, and also join us for our law courses at Winters Inn. Right now we're teaching a course on Christian nationhood. Thank you, and we'll talk to you again.